Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I figured I would do what everybody else does at this time of year and do the mid-year book tag. We have a bunch of questions here. I've seen a lot of people do this. I don't know who the original creator is, but I'm not even sure I remember who I saw do it. I know I saw Freya, and then I've seen a couple other mid-year book tag videos. But whatever, I'll leave channels linked down below from who I've seen do this, as well as the questions if you guys want to do it yourself. But yeah, let's get started. So the first question is the best book I've read so far in 2026. And I think, hands down, it has to be Babel by R.F. Kuang. I was very late to the party on this one, and pretty much all of R.F. Kuang's books. This is an author that I have heard about and have been wanting to read for such a long time. I ended up finally picking up Babel, and I was so surprised at how much I loved this book. This follows a bunch of college students who are brought to Oxford, who are like translation students. There's a secret society involved in this. There's a lot of conversations about colonialism, cultural identity, a little bit of sexism, rebellion. I just really enjoyed this. It's written a bit like a textbook. There are a lot of footnotes in here, and I think that if you're not interested in linguistics, this will end up being kind of a slog for you. But I was absolutely fascinated by everything. I loved reading about linguistics, about translating, about all of the word origins and how that resulted in different magic happening. I really related to the main character, Robin. There were just a lot of themes that I resonated in this book. Talked about the struggle between self-preservation and the good of the community. They talked about the feeling of being disconnected from your culture and not really fully feeling part of where you are now versus your heritage. And there were a lot of conversations about the gray morality of change and revolution. I feel like most of these themes might not be super profound for every reader, but I do think that the way that she addressed them and the way that they were dealt with in this book just made it good to read for anybody. They felt like good reminders for anyone, even if the concepts are not new. This by far is probably the best book that I've read in 2026 at this point, and it has just made me way more excited to pick up the rest of R.F. Kuang's books. Then on the other hand, we're gonna go for the worst book in 2026, and for me that would be So Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. This is the second book in the Divine Traders trilogy. Okay, I lied. This is the first book in the Divine Traders trilogy. This follows two sisters, one who is like the chosen one of their small island, and one who just wants to make a name for herself outside of being the chosen one's sister. At the very beginning of the book, the sister, who is not the chosen one, ends up being bonded with a dragon of their oppressors and is taken back to the oppressor's mainland to learn about dragon riding and dragon bonds. I was severely let down by this book. It didn't give what the synopsis kind of said it would, or the tagline said it would. The tagline says a dragon took her sister and she'll set the world on fire to bring her back. But I found that that wasn't really the case. The chosen one sister spent a majority of the book just kind of whining and complaining. She seemed to be more focused on this random love interest than getting her sister back. She would be aware that she shouldn't do something because it was going to go wrong, and then do it anyway, like a few chapters later, as if she completely forgot that she knew that she shouldn't do it. I feel like the characters just didn't make sense. They didn't have a lot of depth to them. All the characters felt very one note to me. Despite this being the first book in the series, it also weirdly had a second book syndrome feeling, because the setup of this book is that the small island went through a war 5 years earlier, which set up these two characters. And I have looked everywhere to see if there was something before this book, and I didn't see anything. So we end up learning and recapping about the war that happened before this book starts, to the point where it just feels like a second book syndrome. It feels like a setup for the next book, and that we are in between the action. I don't know if this is just because this book is a YA and I am above the intended age range, so it just didn't hit the same, or what, but I will say that I don't think, even as a younger reader, I don't think I would have liked this very much. It was just a letdown for me. I was expecting a lot more female rage. I was expecting stronger female characters who actually acted instead of just talked about acting. So I ended up rating this one a 2-star. I did read the second book and I liked that a bit better. Unfortunately for me, this entire duology is just not, I wouldn't recommend it. The next question says, new release I haven't read yet. There are a bunch of new releases that I haven't read yet, but the 3 that stood out to me are Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker, Escape by Stephen Fishbach, and The Poet Empress by Shen. Japanese Gothic is a dual timeline book. One takes place in present day and one takes place in, I think, the 1800s. The synopsis said something about a ghost story. It says, October 2026, Lee Turner has to flee New York and go to his father's home in Japan. But something is terribly wrong with the house. No animals will come near it. The bedroom window isn't always a window, and a woman with a sword appears in the yard when night falls. And October 1877 follows Sen, a young samurai in exile, hiding from imperial soldiers in a house. A monster came home from war wearing her father's face, but Sen would do anything to please him, even turn her sword on her own mother. She knows the soldiers will soon slaughter her whole family. When she sees a terrible omen, a young foreign man who appears outside her window. And the bottom says, one of these people is a ghost, one of these stories is a lie, something is hiding beneath the house of sword ferns, and Lee and Sen will soon wish they'd never unburied it. So it's kind of a dual timeline thing, but they somehow are able to interact. I was just interested in this because this is the same author as Bat Eater and Other Names for Saying, which I read earlier this year, last year, I think in January this year, I read that book and I really enjoyed it. So I was excited to read another book by her. Escape by Stephen Fishbach. This is a reality TV based book. It's inspired by Survivor. It follows a man who is a washed up reality show veteran who wants another chance at glory. He's offered a spot on a new jungle survival show set on a remote island. I think at the same time, it also follows a producer who is looking for redemption with this show. The bottom says, at first the contestants' goals seem simple: survive the wild, build a raft, win treasure, but what begins as a battle for money and fame spirals into something far more dangerous. Ultimately, the real question isn't about who will win the cash, but who can escape the island at all. If you know anything about me, I love my reality TV. I remember watching Stephen Fishbach on Survivor, so I'm really excited to see how his experiences influence this book. And then the third new release that I still want to read is The Poet Empress by Shen. I honestly have no idea what this book is about. I just remember watching Jamie Falk read this book, and she comped it to A Song to Drown Rivers, but with more in-depth politics, I believe, which I'm really excited about. It follows a girl who offers herself as a concubine to the cruel heir of the Azalea dynasty in order to save her family and her village. As the court stands on the edge of civil war, she is found at the center as the prince's chosen. To survive, she must harden her heart, rely on her wit, and become dangerous herself, even if it means learning the art of poetry magic in secret. In a world where women are forbidden to read and wielding the most powerful spell of all, a ballad of death and love. This sounds absolutely fascinating. I am so excited to read this, and I honestly don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. Then we have anticipated releases. The top two on my radar are Hollywood Ending by John Green and The Knave and the Moon by Rachel Gillig. Hollywood Ending is John Green's new novel. It is the first novel he has written since back in like the Fault in Our Stars days. It's set to come out September 22nd, and it focuses on two young actors navigating fame while filming a biopic about Andy Warhol, exploring themes of celebrity, love, and the attention economy through dual perspectives. This is also John Green's first adult fiction book, whereas before all of his fiction books were young adult. So I am really excited to read his young adult books. I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid. I loved Looking for Alaska. I loved The Fault in Our Stars. Paper Towns was a little less fun, but yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does with this and how his writing is in an adult format. And then The Knave and the Moon by Rachel Gillig is the second book in the Stonewater Kingdom duology. The first book is The Night and the Moth. I actually haven't read The Night and the Moth yet, but I did read Rachel Gillig's other duology, One Dark Window, and I absolutely loved that. I was fully immersed in that world. I was obsessed with those characters, and I think I've heard mixed reviews about The Night and the Moth, but I've heard that the gargoyle is supposed to be a very funny character, and I am just intrigued to jump into this story. I've been waiting for The Knave and the Moon to come out just because I didn't know for sure if The Night and the Moth ended in a cliffhanger, and I wasn't willing to wait on a cliffhanger. So The Knave and the Moon is set to release on September 1st. Right around then, I'll probably end up going through and reading the whole duology, and I'm so excited to get into it. The next prompt on the list is The Biggest Surprise, and for me, that has to be The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is a epistolary, is that how you say it? It's written in letters between these two sisters, Sally and Nettie, and it follows their lives in 20th century Georgia. I was pleasantly surprised by this. I thought I was going to have a bit of an issue reading this because I'm not the biggest fan of epistolary novels. I usually struggle my way through classics, but I actually really enjoyed this one. This book covered so many topics, including domestic abuse, rape, queer identity, religion, racism, and colonialism. There were a lot of conversations about power dynamics, whether that was between white and black people, Western society versus African society, men versus women. And so I feel like this was actually a very accessible classic. I don't know if it's technically considered a classic or if it's considered a modern classic because it's from 1982, but yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I ended up rating it 4.5 stars, which is probably the highest I've ever rated any sort of classic kind of book. So yeah, if you haven't picked this up yet, I highly, highly recommend. And then the next question is The Biggest Disappointment, and unfortunately for me, that was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Infernal Devices series, which is the second series in the Shadowhunters universe. I have always been obsessed with the Mortal Instruments. I absolutely loved it when I read it in high school, and even during my reread as an adult. I absolutely loved these characters, this world. I felt very, very immersed in it, but unfortunately, I didn't get those same feelings from Clockwork Angel. I don't know if that's because this is in a historical setting and I don't really read a ton of historical fiction books. I don't read a ton of historical fantasy, and I don't know if that is what kind of threw me off, but I just found it very hard to immerse myself in this world. I found it very hard to connect to these characters. One of the main things that I loved about the Mortal Instruments series is that Clare is a very strong character. She might not know what's going on and she might be really scared, but she will go and do the thing anyway. She just didn't really let anything stop her, and I absolutely love that in my female main characters. Tessa wasn't really like that. She was focused enough on wanting to save her brother, but she never really wanted to do anything. I don't know how to kind of phrase it. Like, she did. It's not that she sat on the sidelines and did nothing the entire book. She absolutely did. She endured torture. She put herself in dangerous situations, all in the name of trying to save her brother. But there was something about her that just kind of fell flat. She didn't give off that same determined, strong, badass character that Clary did. And I think for me, it might have just been the amount of references that her and Jessamine had to being a lady and how it isn't proper for a lady to be doing certain things. Obviously, I grew up in modern times and that's not really a mindset I've ever had. So all of that just really annoyed me. I didn't like that at all. I also wasn't a fan of Will. I feel like he is just a less charming knockoff version of Jace from the Mortal Instruments. Even Jem, who was by and large my favorite character, felt very surface level. All of them felt very monotone. I feel like there wasn't a ton of depth or development for any of these characters. I didn't like the amount of talking that they did, where they would mention that something is being hidden, but then take absolutely forever before revealing whatever it is. Half of it still isn't revealed. I feel like the villain in this series, I'm assuming that the villain in this book is going to be the villain that carries out through the next two books, and he just doesn't seem all that interesting. We have no idea at this point what his motivations are and why he's doing the things that he's doing, and that really bugs me, because how am I supposed to care about what he's doing if I don't know what his plan is and why he's doing it? I didn't have that good of a time with this. I did still rate it a 3-star, so it wasn't awful. I just don't think it was a very memorable story. I finished this 3 days ago and I'm already having trouble remembering what specifically happened in this book, which means that I should pick up the next book really soon. Otherwise, I'll be really confused. But I am just not excited to pick up the rest of the series. I definitely still will, because I need to finish the series to move on with the rest of the Shadowhunters universe. But with everyone saying that this series is way better than the Mortal Instruments and this being the best series in the entire universe, it was just a huge letdown for me. The next question is favorite new author, and I honestly don't have one. I feel like I just don't have one right now, so I'm just going to skip that. Well, the next two questions I'm going to do in tandem. It's the newest fictional crush and a book that made me cry. And I have the same book for both, but I'm going to be completely honest, I don't remember it. Let's just say the book is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I do remember really liking this and being surprised by this, but I don't particularly remember the details of this story. When I was going back through my reviews of books that I've read, in there I noted that I absolutely loved Justin because of the effort that he puts in for Emma. Ooh, okay, now that I'm talking about it, I kind of remember. I remember him planning dates to the level of like sending her a Google form and having her choose her preferences, and from there he would plan a date around that would be very special for her. I kind of remember him finding time for her despite everything that he had going on. So I do remember that I really loved him as a character, but like I said, the details are kind of fuzzy. And then in the same vein, my review said that this book had me crying. And while I do remember telling my partner that I was bawling during this book, I don't remember the reason why. I want to say that it had to do with the ending, or like the last quarter of the book and how everything was playing out. Yes, yeah. It was the last quarter of the book, and I thought that the way things were being handled was very realistic. And because that third act conflict was very realistic and understandable, I remember that ripping my heart to shreds. So yeah, for both Newest Fictional Crush and Book That Made You Cry, it has to go to Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. It took me so long to read this, and it's one of those books that I kind of wish that I didn't put off, but I'm also kind of glad that I did, because the first two books in this interconnected series I loved just so much, and I was worried that the hype had gotten too much for this one. And so I think waiting and pushing it off and letting the hype die down in my brain really gave this book the best shot that it had. I recommend this one, especially if you liked Part of Your World or Yours Truly. You should definitely read this. The next prompt is the most beautiful book you've bought in 2026. And for that, I absolutely have to bring back The Poet Empress by Shen. Look how absolutely stunning this is. The cover has this like glitter finish on it. It has the beautiful temple in the front, these copper sprayed edges, and then if you take off the front cover, this is the naked hardback. Absolutely beautiful. And the inside front cover has amazing artwork, and then the back is the same. So by far, The Poet Empress is the most beautiful book that I've bought in 2026. And I want to say it's probably the most beautiful book I own in general. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then finally, the last question is books that need to be read by the end of the year. This goes hand in hand with the 2026 reading goals check-in that I want to do, so I will just do that. Earlier this year, I made a 26 in 2026, which really had like 30 something books on it because I put entire series on there like a goddamn weirdo. My 26 in 2026 technically has 32 books on it because I decided to put 2 trilogies and 2 duologies on there. I figured it would be a win if I had started these series at all. Out of those 32 books, I have read 10 of them. One was a DNF. I ended up DNFing Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy because that book was just so disturbing. It followed this 17-year-old girl who was obsessed with her writing teacher, and they end up getting into this sexual relationship. I didn't really feel like there was a message going on. I got like halfway through before I DNF'd it. I didn't really feel like there was any commentary to it. It felt like every sex scene in that book was there for a shock effect. It didn't feel like there was any meaning behind it. I could be wrong because I never finished the book, but I already don't like sex scenes in my book, and so having that between an inappropriate age gap relationship and it happening every other chapter in like a 200-page book, it was way too much for me. I wasn't a fan, and I just had to stop. On top of finishing my 26 in 2026, which is really 32 in 2026, I want to read down my physical TBR. I currently have 98 books on there. Ideally, I would like to get it down to around 50, but that is a very lofty goal for the end of the year because I would need to read 48 books, which would be completely pushing it in terms of my reading speed. And on top of that, I would have to not buy any books at all for the second half of the year, which is already impossible because I have a bunch of pre-orders that are scheduled to come in the second half of the year. Plus my birthday hasn't happened yet, and I love to go book shopping for my birthday. Plus Christmas is at the end of the year, and I love to go book shopping for Christmas. So the odds of me getting anywhere near 50, I think, are really low unless I do a bunch of unhauls. So while that is like a stretch goal, if I can end the year around less than 75 books on my physical TBR, I think I would count that as a win. More than that, I would really like to get all of the books on my physical TBR that have been there since 2023 and earlier off of it. I believe that's like 20 books, 30 books. Oh, never mind. I have 16 books that I bought in 2023 or earlier still sitting on my physical TBR, and so I ideally would like to get all 16 of these books read. That way at the end of 2026 I will only have books from 2024 to 2026, and I can start trying to shorten the amount of time these books are sitting on my TBR. So everything 2023 and earlier off this year, and then ideally anything from 2024 would be gone by the end of 2027 and so on, so that the age of my TBR, my physical TBR, isn't getting too long, because I keep buying books and I want to make sure that I'm actually reading the books that I buy. Earlier at the beginning of the year, I talked about how I was working on Herkyed 2.0, which is the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, second version by Mccurdy on YouTube. I ended up finishing that on June 10th, and Mccurdy has released version 3 of the challenge, which I will leave the links to that down below in case anyone is interested in doing that. I don't really know if I want to have that as a reading goal for the second half of this year. Towards the end, it got very difficult for me to find interest and love in reading because I was reading specifically for prompts, and I feel like to regain my love of reading and really turn this back into a hobby, I just need to free read. I need to mood read, choose whatever I want. In the same vein, those are things that I'm going to change about this channel. I was reading a lot specifically for videos, and it made reading feel like a chore, and I wasn't really a fan of that. I think at least right now where I am, I'm just going to read freely, just choose books based off of my mood and whatever I want at the moment. I'm not going to be too bogged down by outside reading factors like challenges, TBRs, even though I did just film a monthly TBR, videos, any of that stuff. I think I'm just going to try and find my love of reading again. So yeah. If you stuck with me this long in the video, thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below how your reading year has been going. If you have a yearly TBR, how many books have you read off of it? Comment down below what new release you are most excited for, whether it was released in the first half of the year or you're still waiting for it in the second half. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!